Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to 4 Strategy Gaming. We're going to be taking a look at a Zerg strategy today. Now this is going to be a little different from the typical strategy video, and a lot of times we like to take a look at different build orders and various types of aggression. Specifically in this video though, we're going to be taking a look at, this is a Zerg vs Protoss, and we're going to be looking at how D-Killer scouts out early game Zealot Sentry heavy pressure. It's actually a 5-gate from his opponent. You can see over here his opponent Moon Prime. He comes out with a 5-gate and going a Zealot Sentry early pressure. And we're going to look at how D-Killer scouts it out and subsequently how he can defend himself against it, work up a transition, and then be able to overcome his opponent and actually force a pretty quick GG. So the build order itself, nothing that we haven't talked about before. Specifically what D-Killer is going to be doing is he actually goes pool extractor right after starting off on one base, and then he moves into his expansion. The advantage of this, of course, is that getting that extractor so very quickly and starting off on one base gets you some fast speedlings, and that allows you to do a lot of scouting and get a little bit of early game map control. So that's the entire point of that. So we can see again D-Killer just starting off on one base, and then he's going to come out with those initial Zerglings and then move right into his expansion. But the most important thing, and the thing we're really focusing on and looking at here, is the scouting that D-Killer does, how he's able to see and figure out what his opponent's doing based on the time of the game and what he should have in relation to what he could possibly have, and then after that how he responds and defends himself. Alright, so I'm going to slow it down a little bit. We're going to go back here and look. Okay, so again, started off on one base, got that fast metabolic boost, moved into that expansion, everything looks normal. Now it's time for the scouting. Now that initial scout, he moves up, he sees that first zealot, no big deal. The next thing you want to focus on is, okay, is he coming out with sentries, or did he get a stalker? If he just gets a stalker, then he may be teching up a little bit harder in the main. If he gets a sentry, then chances are he's doing one of two things. The type of all-in kind of build that we're going to see Moon Prime do this game, which is that zealot sentry 5-gate push, or it's also very possible that he'd be going sentry heavy expand. And so these are the things that D-Killer does want to scout out for. Again, everything looking pretty normal right now. He's actually coming out to a few more Zerglings to see if he can do a little bit of damage. You can see actually coming out with 10 Zerglings right now instead of droning up. So he wants to get a little bit of a larger Zergling force, see if he can do a little bit of damage or delay this expansion. Alright, so I'm going to pause right now. So he moves up. He sees a Zealot and a Sentry, but that is it. That is all he has seen so far. So again, it's either going to be some crazy all-in build, or it's just a Sentry heavy expand. That's also very standard. Now, if you're seeing a Sentry heavy expand, a lot of times what you'll see is like a 3-gate expand. You'll see maybe 1 or 2 Zealots, and then between 5 and 7 Sentries. If you start to see more Zealots than that, then there's likely not an expansion coming out, and he's very likely going to try to be doing something all-in-y, as we do see here. So let's see right now. Again, we're going to pick it back up. The whole point is to try to continue up the scouting, camp out the front of your opponent's base until you see him either move down and drop a pylon to try to move into that expansion, or unless you see more of a tip-off as to what's going on. So there we go, moving on up, and again, he saw 1 Zealot and 2 Sentries. Still not really sure what's happening. He's still got the option of just going for that Sentry heavy expand. So you do want to keep a Zergling spotting out that expansion as long as possible just to see when and if that does come down. But besides that, everything's looking pretty normal so far. So again, just seen a Zealot and 2 Sentries. That's been all. Moving up again, and what is that? He sees 3 Zealots now. Now again, that is a bit much, because if the Protoss player was going Sentry heavy expand, he wouldn't want this many Zealots. That extra Zealot or 2 sets behind and delays that expansion incredibly. So what's the immediate response here? D-Killer is coming out with the Spore Crawler to try to deal with the possibility of DT or anything like that. But in seeing the total amount of Zealots there, what does he do? He immediately cancels that off and drops a Spine. He's really worried about that early aggression. Going to keep up that scouting though. Use the advantage of this speedling, of the metabolic boost, to keep that scouting consistent so you can see exactly what your opponent's doing. At the same time, D-Killer moving up to his layer tech to try to prepare for any possible transition, which would better help him deal with any aggression that may be coming. But again, he's not sure yet if this is an all-in or not, and he's just sitting on that 1 Spine. Coming out with that 2, though. He's a little bit concerned about early aggression, but let's see that confirmation here. This secondary scouting, that's not what I want to do. The secondary scouting, and that fully confirms that this pressure is coming. So there you go. Seeing him move across the map, seeing the amount of forces there, immediately responds by dropping down a ton of Spine Crawlers. And again, The other big, huge tip-off here is the fact that D-Killer is scouting out this additional expansion with this Zergling, and the fact that nothing has come down. There's been no expansion, so this tells you, okay, there's a very, very strong push coming, and we will actually take a look inside of Moon Prime's base, and you can see there it is, the 5 gateways, and it's Sentry Heavy plus Zealot is exactly what's happening. So again, the early scouting, he wasn't sure what was happening. He saw the 2 sentries and the 1 Zealot, but that could very well be a Sentry Heavy expand. But once you saw anything really more than 2 or 3 Zealots, then that's really a big tip-off, and if you keep up that scouting with the Zergling, you'll see this coming. All right, so the next thing is going to be I need to defend myself. So lots of Spine Crawlers are going to do the trick, and you have the option of possibly moving into Roaches, but what we're actually going to see D-Killer do here, and this is very important as well, with that Sentry Heavy expand, expect force fields at your ramp. And with that said, that you're going to want to make sure that the majority of your forces are down low, and most of what you are coming out with through your larva are going to be at your expansion hatchery as opposed to in your main. Because if you deal with continuous force fields, it's going to be almost impossible for you to get those reinforcements down to help. The next big thing is actually using your Zerglings to try to take out those sentries. That's actually going to be one of your major targets, because that will help deal with this constant force field action that you should expect to see at your ramp. So D-Killer is dealing with this, but the fact that he's got so many Spine Crawlers is what has allowed him to defend himself thus far. Trying to find that proxy pylon and take that out, obviously going to be a good idea as well. So we're going to see actually move up to the back of that, and he almost manages to take it out. If he could have taken that out, that would have been absolutely huge. He wasn't able to do that, unfortunately, but here's that transition. We saw that layer coming out, and then he immediately went into Infestation Pit. And if you are coming up against a push like this and you can get Infestors in play, you're pretty much guaranteed to win at that point, because there's nothing going for such a strong push. The Protoss player will be so far behind in terms of tech that there's actually going to be very little he can do to defend against that. So again, just making sure, D-Killer is making sure that he's got enough spines up. Again, we saw another attempt to try to kill off that pylon. Unfortunately, didn't work. But just buying himself time with these Spine Crawlers, the few Zerglings that he does have, and then coming out immediately with those Infestors. And once those Infestors are in play, once more, unfortunately, there's really nothing that the Protoss player can do. So here we go. We've got continued defense with these Spine Crawlers. Also, notably, back over here, there still isn't any expansion, so that's a dead giveaway if you use that additional Zergling to keep eyes on that Expo. If you happen to lose that Zergling, it would be suggested just to use your Overlord to sacrifice to check it. But the fact that we're 10 plus in game, there's still no expansion, means that this aggression isn't stopping anytime soon, and D-Killer has to be continuously prepared to defend himself. But again, it's just the idea of continuous build those Spine Crawlers, work your way up to that tech advantage, whatever it is, and once more, again, in this game, D-Killer's tech advantage of choice was to come out with those Infestors, and now that the Infestors are in play, dropping a couple fungals, and then just seeing the Infestors, the Protoss player here is going to call the GG, and it makes sense because now that those Infestors are in play, this push is pretty much rendered useless, and there you go, Moon Prime calling the GG. So again, no build order particularly in this one. Again, all we really saw was pool first, extractor into Expo. The biggest thing was the scouting. Moved up with that initial scouting, saw 1 Zealot and a Sentry. Not really a clear indication as to what's going on. Then saw 1 Zealot and 2 Sentries, thinking, okay, it's possible that we're going to be seeing a Sentry Heavy expand. Now he was preparing by getting that Spore to deal with a possibility of air harass or possibly some quick DT. But keeping up that scouting, you really want to be aggressive with your scouting. You want to be constantly checking. Once he saw like 2+ Zealots plus that heavy amount of sentries, he knew something funny was going on, so he dropped a couple Spine Crawlers. Then an additional scouting again, seeing that force move across the map, seeing even more Zealots, tipped him off, okay, there's a very strong push coming. He didn't even have to see the fact that there were so many gateways. Just seeing that many units at the 7 to 8 minute mark and seeing them move across the map told him this is a big strong push, coming out with all the Spine Crawlers to deal with that. Make sure that you've got your units on the low ground at your expansion to defend, because you will deal with force fields at the wall. Work your way up to some sort of tech advantage, and again, D-Killer chose Infestors in this game, dropping that Infestation Pit, and then once those were in play, since Moon Prime was so dedicated to this push, there was nothing he could do to deal with those Infestors, and he was forced to call the GG. Alright guys, thank you for watching. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. This Zerg strategy video, again, a little bit different than the normal build orders, but hopefully useful nonetheless. As always guys, if you like the content, please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Keep watching and keep owning.